Today is April 9th, 2019. Ms. Gloria, you and I met back in 1984. Eric and I had become friends at college, and he invited me back to your house on Rogers Avenue to watch a movie and shoot some pool. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Let's go back and start at the beginning. Can you tell me when you were born?
I was born January 19th, 1938 in Baltimore, Maryland at City Hospital.
What do you remember about growing up in Baltimore?
I remember growing up in Baltimore was pretty easy, pretty nice. We lived in a neighborhood with a lot of kids. Everybody got along with everybody. Everybody knew everybody. We didn't lock our doors at night. We would play. And in the summertime, we would play outside in the morning and run up and down the street and get dirty. After that, 12 o'clock, we had to go in and take a nap. And then we would wash up, put on our evening clothes, and we had to play girly games. Jacks, jump rope, high school, jump from step to step, playing school. When I went to school, we all lived in a neighborhood, and we all went to schools in our neighborhood. And everybody was in the neighborhood was black except Mr. Silverman, who was the Jewish man who owned the corner store, his wife, and his 2 children. But segregation was, we knew it was things were segregated, but until you became a teenager, it didn't matter to you because you circulated in your own area. Like, I lived on Moja Street, there was Brunt Street, Lafayette Avenue, Pennsylvania Avenue. Between where I lived and where I went to school, it's just mostly the areas that you circulated in. You didn't circulate out of your area. Halloween time, we would go from Moja Street all the way up to North Avenue. But we couldn't go cross North Avenue because that was when it was segregated. And when I was in junior high school, the 3 boys from my class, Michael Board, I can't remember all of them, but they were the first boys the black boys that was allowed to go to Poly. That was in 1953. When I graduated from junior high school, I went to Carver, and they were the first boys who segregated Carver. But we could go downtown to, used to be the May Company, and then it became Heck May, and it was on Utah and Lexington. And when you go down there, we could only shop in the basement. And in Braggart Gutness, we could shop in the basement. And Hustlers was across the street next to the Woolworths. We weren't allowed to go in Hustlers at all. We weren't allowed to go in Hustlers at all. And when you shopped in Braggart Gutness, but you still couldn't try on anything. But you could shop in the basement. And then Hustlers was the last store that allowed us to segregate. But all of the stores downtown were basically segregated. We went to Goldsboro. Goldsboro was a little Jewish store, and it was on Utah Street, and they sold everything we needed that was inexpensive. So that's basically where we shopped at. And when I first got my first job at Providence Hospital, it was this store downtown called Linda Lynn's. It was supposed to be one of the good exclusive stores. And at that time, you could put stuff on layaway. So every time I got paid, I would go down to Linda Lynn's, put my clothes on layaway, and walk home. I spent all my money till I would walk home from there all the way back home, but I was happy. And at that time, we could get anything you want on layaway. But it took a long time for them to allow us to go to the other stores. We could go to Woolworths, but when we went to Woolworths, that's where they had the hot dog stands and you could go eat at the counter. We were allowed to buy, but we weren't allowed to sit at the counters to eat.
What did you love to do as a child?
I liked to roller skate.
Roller skate?
Street skate. We're on Union number 5 street skates. We used to skate up and down the streets and ride the bikes. I didn't have a bike. My brothers had bikes, and I rode their bikes.
Which streets did you skate on?
We skated on Division Street was the most because Division Street was a hill. And we would hitch a ride on the back of cars up the hill, and then we would skate down. But we skated all around the neighborhood. Division Street, Brunt Street, Mosier Street.
You said there were a lot of kids in your neighborhood. How many siblings did you have?
I have 16. It was 17 of us.
Where did you fall in the order?
I'm number 13 in the 17.
Lucky 13.
Yes, lucky 13. My mother raised 13. She had 17. A couple were born stillborns, and one died at birth.
Where was your house when you grew up with your parents?
We lived in a 3-story row house, 563 Mosier Street. We had 3 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor, and we slept in double beds. And it was 2 at the head and 2 at the foot. 4 of us slept in the bed at one time.
Who did you share a room with?
I shared the bed with my sister Barbara and 3 of my brothers. At that time, girls and boys, we slept together.
Your parents, do you remember where they met?
I don't know where my mother and father met, but my father was from Richmond, Virginia, and my mother was from here in Maryland.
What jobs did your parents have?
My mother didn't work until after my father left, when my baby sister was 2 months old. My father was a state-to-state truck driver, and he was only home mostly on weekends. We didn't see him that often because he drove from state to state. And my mother stayed home because she had so many kids. She just stayed home and took care of us until my father left, and then she did domestic work.
Was your mom a good cook?
My mom was a good cook. My mom cooked everything. We had biscuits every day.
What was her specialty?
Fried chicken every Sunday. Don't care what kind of meat you had, you always had fried chicken to go with it. She used to like brains. You fry brains with eggs. She used to like brains. When I saw that in the icebox, I couldn't eat none of that. But my mom cooked everything. She used to use hog heads. I went to the market and I picked up all this stuff, but I was always a choicy eater. A lot of days I went to bed without eating because if you didn't eat what she had, you didn't eat nothing. And she didn't know I didn't eat all of this because I had different brothers and sisters that would take my food on days that they knew I didn't eat what, so they could eat it, so they didn't squeal because they got more. I didn't like rice, oatmeal, cream of wheat, macaroni. I didn't eat none of that stuff.
When you went to school, did you take bag lunches?
We had to take bologna sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly.
Fruit maybe?
You got fruit. You didn't get fruit that often. You got peaches and stuff in the summertime. You got oranges and apples at Christmas time. Christmas, you got a stocking with oranges, apples, and hard candy if you didn't get nothing else. And I got to play Santa Claus because I was the oldest one at home at that time. So I had to do the shopping. And we didn't have Christmas trees all the time, so I wait till midnight, Christmas Eve, midnight. And you go to the corner and they getting ready to take the trees back, so they'll give you a Christmas tree. And that's how we got a lot of Christmas trees, because my mom didn't have money to buy trees. And if we didn't have a tree, you had a couch, and all your stuff was in a pile on the couch. But everybody had a stocking, and it was always hard candy, apples, and oranges, and nuts, and that stocking.
Sounds nice.
But my mom, she did a good job. She raised all of us on her own. She did very well. And she lived to be 73. She died in 1979. And she was everybody's grandmother. After she had us, she babysat for all the kids in the neighborhood. Everybody knew her as Nanny. She watched all the children in the neighborhood. And then when she stopped watching children, she became a foster grandmother at daycare. She went to the daycare and took care of children. Because children was all she knew. My mom got sick. My sister was sick. My other sister had tuberculosis too. She was in the hospital. And when she was in the hospital, she had triplets. And the little girl died, so she had twins, and we came home. They came home. So while she was in the hospital sick, my mother was taking care of her children. And my mother went downstairs because my brothers were down there in the basement. They supposed to be chopping wood. And they were down there playing around. So when they heard my mother come down the steps, they all started chopping wood. And a piece of wood flew up and hit my mother in the eye. So she had to go to the hospital right away. So I was the oldest one living at home. And I had to take care of Bentley, Ronnie, Petro, Barbara, and my sister's 3 children. I was 15 years old, and I had to wash, iron, cook, clean, go to market, and feed all of those children till my mother came out the hospital. She was in there for about a month, and she lost her eyesight in that eye. And my sister was in the hospital with the tuberculosis. So I knew then that I was not going to have a whole lot of children.
You said your father drove a truck. Did you have a car also?
No, we didn't have a car.
Did not have a car.
No. I never had a car during my family had no car during my youth. I got my first car in 1970.
What do you remember most about your mom and dad?
My mom was everybody's mother. She took care of all the kids in the neighborhood, and everybody called her Nanny. And we had homemade bread every day. We had biscuits. We didn't get bread from the store. We had biscuits every day. Oatmeal cream a week every morning. She cooked us a good breakfast, a good meal. We would come home from school at lunchtime and eat our lunch and go back to school. But my mom was just a house homemaker, and she just raised her kids and raised almost everybody's kids in the neighborhood.
What do you think was the most important thing to your mother?
The most important thing to my mother? The most important thing to my mother was her children.
Raised her children.
She raised all of us, and she loved her children. We were her life. She would watch us, and she didn't do much. She would go to the movie, but that's all. We lived around the corner from the movie. So she would put us in the bed and in the house, and then she would go to the movie, and she would come home intermission time and check on us and make sure we were there. And the man that ran the movie was our neighbor, and he would let her come out intermission time and go back because he knew what she was doing.
What theater was that?
The Diane Theater on Pennsylvania Avenue in the 1500 block.
Let's skip to high school. What do you remember liking about high school?
I liked school because I got to meet and play with people that was away from home, that was not in my immediate neighborhood. And I liked arithmetic, and I liked reading. I enjoyed school because it was fun.
Who was your best friend in high school?
I had no best friend in school. I had a lot of friends that I associated with, but most of my best friends were from the neighborhood.
What high school did you attend?
I went to Henry Harlan Garnett School, and then I went to Booker T. Washington High School.
And your favorite subject was mathematics?
Yes. And then I went to Carver Vocational Technical High School.
So when did you meet Mr. Donald?
I met Donald when I was 15 years old. I was living on Mosier Street. He lived on Pitcher Street. I met him through a girlfriend of mine who was my neighbor.
What was her name?
Her name was Bertha.
How did Bertha know Mr. Donald?
He knew Mr. Donald. She knew Mr. Donald from the people she used to hang around with, and they were friends. And she used to babysit for a lady named Miss Dean, and Mr. Donald used to go to Deanie's house all the time. So that's how I met him.
Did you and Mr. Donald go to school together?
No, we didn't go to school together.
Do you remember what school he went to?
He went to St. Peter Clavers, and then he went to Carver.
So do you remember your first date? Where did you guys go?
We went to the Diane Theater to the movie. I don't remember what we saw, but that's where we went.
And subsequent dates, did you go to the dancing or movies?
We went dancing at the Y. The Y used to have dancing every Friday night. And we went to a lot of house parties. Everybody in the neighborhood would usually have house parties. And we went to a lot of house parties.
The dances, were they live music or records?
No live music, just records. I did used to go to like the dance halls that my mom said on Sundays we weren't allowed to do that kind of stuff. So one Sunday, I wanted to go to the New Albert Hall and I didn't have any money. So my friends got up enough money, because I think it was like 75 cents. And I went in and I won the door prize. And the door prize was $10. I couldn't spend $10 without my mama knowing I had money. Because you go to the corner store, if you spend 25 cents, Mr. Silverman wanted to know where you got that money from. Because he was the store man and he knew you wasn't supposed to have no whole lot of money. So my mother was running out of money. She didn't have any money. And I had this $10. I couldn't tell her I got won the $10 because I went to the dance hall I wasn't supposed to be at. So I was going to Carver. I went to school and it was raining that day. So when I came home, I took the $10 bill and I wet it. And I went in the house and I told my mom, I found it when I got off the bus. It was in the gutter when I got off the bus. And she took it and she said, I told you the Lord was gonna make a way. But she didn't know how the Lord made that way. But I couldn't spend $10. I mean, she would know. If I spent $5, I mean, they knew everything you spent. Everything you had. If you bought something in that house that she didn't buy, that you borrowed from somebody else, you had to take it back. She did not allow you to bring anything in that house, any skirts, or because she might thought you were stealing. Take it back where you got it from.
Do you remember when Mr. Donald used to drive? What was his first car?
His first car was a 1954 green and yellow Chevrolet. He bought it at around 1957. It wasn't new when he bought it, but that's the car. He used to be the chauffeur when we went on double dates.
Do you know how long he kept that car?
He kept that car till we got married, and the next car he got was a 1959 Chevrolet.
And you bought that car together?
We bought that car together.
What color was that one?
Black and white.
Sounds nice. How long did you and Mr. Donald date?
We dated for 5 years before we got married.
Now, how did you know he was the one?
I really didn't know he was the one. I just know that I guess I fell in love and we got married.
How old were you?
I was 20 and he was 23.
Where did you get married?
At St. Peter Clavers Catholic Church on Fremont and Pennsylvania Avenue. Father Tyson.
Was that in the wintertime?
We got married on February the 15th, 1958. It was a storm. It was a blizzard. It started snowing at 12 o'clock that evening when I was in the hairdresser's getting my hair done. 7 o'clock that night, it was a blizzard. I was late for the wedding. I got married in my boots. We had no music. We had no flowers. We had no people. Just my immediate family. My mother, his mother and father, and his aunt, and my brother made it down from New York. But by the time he got here, We had just gotten married, and he was late because it was a big snowstorm. Everything closed.
Later on, did you have a party for friends to come celebrate?
We had planned to have a reception at his mother's house that night, but nobody showed up, so no, we didn't have a reception later. I wound up spending 2 nights at his mother's house before we could go home to our own apartment because of the weather.
Did you manage to go on a honeymoon later on?
No, we never went on a honeymoon.
Never planned it out.
Never planned a honeymoon, never went on a honeymoon. I was pregnant with my son Gregory. So we got married in February and he was born in August.
Where did you live the first time together?
The first time we got married, I lived in my aunt's house at 2241 Madison Avenue. She had a big 3-story house, and the 3rd floor was like an apartment. We had our own living room, we had our own bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen.
When did you buy your house together, and where was it?
The first house we bought together was Rogers Avenue, 3804 North Rogers Avenue. We bought that house in August of 1969. But when I left my aunt's house, I moved to 2021 Ruxton Avenue, next door to where my husband's parents live. He knew the people that were living there and they were moving, so we rented that house. And I moved there in 1962. We stayed there until 1969 when I moved to Rogers Avenue.
What were your jobs back then?
Well, when I first met Donald, he was working for Cleaners on Madison Avenue. And then we got together and his parents, his father and his brother was working at Western Electric. So we filled out a lot of applications and we got him a job in I think it was 1956. He started working for Western Electric on Bromley Highway. My first job was at Providence Hospital, medical records secretary in Providence Hospital. I graduated in June and I started there in August. I had taken tests and I passed the tests to work for the Income Tax Control Office in Annapolis, but my mother said that that was too far for me to travel by myself, so I didn't take that job. But my first job was as a secretary in the medical records department at Providence Hospital in the 1500 block of Division Street.
How long did you have that job?
I worked at Providence Hospital from 1956 until December 1966, and then I left there and I went to Social Security.
Mr. Donald, how long did he have his job?
He worked from Western Electric until he retired.
What do you think made you and Mr. Donald successful at your work?
Well, he was successful at his work because he liked it. He moved from different positions and he worked evening shifts most of the time, and he liked working evening shift. I was successful at my job because I felt like I was blessed to get the job for Social Security, and at that job you could move from place to place. I started as a grade 2 key punch operator. I retired in 2007 as a grade 11 claims authorizer. So you move from job to job. You just had to prove yourself, take the test, and do what you needed to do to progress.
So what do you remember about the boys being born?
Gregory was born on a Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I let Donald go to work, and then I let my nephew took me to the hospital. And when Donald came home from work, that's when I told him I had Gregory. And I was the only one in the hospital who had a boy at that time. All the other ladies had girls. They wanted a boy, and I wanted a girl. Gregory was born, and he came home from the hospital in a dress because I knew I was going to have a girl. And I didn't have a name for him right away. So I eventually named him, and I named him Gregory because I didn't want a Donald. I had a husband named Donald and a brother named Donald, and I didn't want another Donald. So I wanted a name that none of us had in the family, so I named him Gregory. And my mom babysat him, and then she would keep him during the week, and I would go see him on Wednesday because she lived in Cherry Hill, and I brought him home on Friday and took him back Sunday night because we lived so far apart from each other. And then Eric was born in 1962, and he was born on the same day of the Academy Awards. 10 o'clock that night, I was having pains, and I said, no, I'm not ready. But then I went, about 11 o'clock, I went to the hospital, and he was born at 12:02, right after midnight, on April the 10th, 1962. And with Gregory, I went back to work in 6 weeks. With Eric, I didn't go back to work until 8 months. I stayed home with him. I had planned to stay home with him, so I was able to just stay home with him and then go back to my job in December.
When the boys were young, what was your favorite vacation?
Well, when the boys were young, we would take them away every weekend. My sister and I would take the boys somewhere. She had 2 children, a girl and a boy, and I had Eric and Gregory. We would take them to what we call wait and see. If they got in the car and they act right and they just waited to see where we were going, we would go to Hershey Park. We would go to Wildwood Park. We would go sometimes just to Gwynn Oak Park. But we took them somewhere every weekend for when they were young. And then our first trip, we went to Niagara Falls. We went to Niagara Falls for a week. And then the next trip we took, we was in New York for a week. Then we went to Florida. We went to Florida a couple times, like 3 times.
Long drive.
Yeah, well, we would drive halfway, and we would stop at south of the border and spend the night, and then we get up and go the rest of the way. And a couple times we stopped at Savannah, Georgia, and then we would spend the night and drive the rest of the way. So we went to Florida, New York, Niagara Falls, and they were the trips that we went on that we spent some time. The rest of the trips were like weekend trips and day trips. We went to Hershey Park and Hanover Park.
When the boys were young, did they have any pets?
They had 1 dog. His name was Snoopy, and he got killed one year. I was a bowler, so one year I had gone away on a weekend trip to Atlantic City to bowl with my girlfriends. And when I came home, they were all sitting there sad, and he had jumped the fence and got hit by a car, and they buried him in the yard.
You said you were a bowler? I know Greg was a good bowler.
Eric and Gregory both bowled. I took them when they were young to join the Little League. They used to bowl in the midgets at Woodlawn every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Gregory loved bowling. Eric wasn't crazy about it, but he liked it, and he was a better bowler than Gregory as a younger person. But they bowled in the midgets ever since they were about 6 years old. Because I was a bowler. I bowled from 1976 or so, until I bowled up until last year.
I think growing up in Baltimore, everybody learns how to bowl. My brother and I, we used to go bowling every Saturday morning.
Yeah, I was a regular bowler. They used to bowl in the midgets, and I was a bowler. And Papa bowled too.
What was your high game?
My high game was 256. That's the highest I ever bowled.
When you think about Greg and Eric growing up, what words would you use to describe them?
Greg was a mild-mannered person who really wanted to achieve. He wanted to achieve a goal and be somebody. He loved bowling. He was in Cub Scouts, the drum and bugle corps, but he did not play contact sports. But he loved bowling, he loved drumming, and he was just an overachiever. He always wanted to be somebody.
And Eric?
Eric was fly by night. He loved sports. He liked bowling, but not as much as Gregory. He played in the Little League. He was a Little League. He didn't mind having contact sports. And Eric loved to play the guitar. He had friends like his best friend Michael and the other boys that lived up the street from me, Jason. They would always play music, and Eric loved to play the guitar. Gregory played the drums. And Eric took guitar lessons, and every year it was a new thing with him, buying an amplifier. And he also was a skateboarder. Eric loved skateboarding. On Sundays, I would take him to the skateboard park, sit out there in the hot sun while he skateboarded, because it was always on Pulaski Highway, which was too far for me to go home and come back and get him. And then I used to also take them to the baseball games. I was the only mother. I had about 6 little boys in the neighborhood, and I sit out there in the bleachers watching the baseball games with all the little children, because the other parents didn't take them. But I tried to do a lot for them, to give them something to do every weekend, so that they wouldn't be able to say that when they grew up they didn't go anywhere or do anything. So we did something every weekend.
Do you remember meeting Stephanie?
Yeah, I met Stephanie. Gregory met Stephanie when he had left home. He stayed home till he was 27. After that, he bought his house in Rockville. And then he met Stephanie in Washington when they used to go to happy hours, because he used to work in that area, and he wouldn't come home, and they would be at happy hours. But he met Stephanie, I met Stephanie a couple of weeks after he met Stephanie. And when I met Stephanie, he told me that she reminded him of me. So they started dating, and the next thing I know, they were a couple. But I got along with Stephanie, and right away I had no problems with none of the girls that he went with. He had gone with a couple girls before that, but when he met Stephanie, he said this was the one.
And remember meeting Trez?
I met Trez because Eric came home one day and he said that he saw the girl he was going to marry. And she had gone to Towson State University. That's where he saw her. And then when Gregory's fraternity had a function, Eric had brought Trezzy there. And that's when I first met Trezzy. And we hit it off right away. Trezzy's aunt was one of my friends that we didn't know that they were related, because when we went to the function, her aunt had gone to the function with us. And she said, "Is that Trezzy with the little fella?" I said, "Yeah, you know her?" She said, "Yeah, that's my niece." I said, "It's a small world." When Jackie and I and my sister, we traveled a lot together. And come to find out, Trezzy was her niece. And she told Trezzy, "You better treat him right, because the little fella is a good guy." So that's how I first met Trezzy, and then I hit it off with her.
Do you remember when your grandchildren were born?
Yes, I remember when Lauren was born. Lauren was my first grandchild. She was born in 1986, and she was a girl. I couldn't wait to get a girl. So when Lauren was born, Trezzy and Eric was living at my house. So she was like my child. When Trezzy needed somebody to watch her, I was there. And every weekend I would just take Lauren somewhere. The people I work with knew Lauren, and they said that they thought Lauren was mine because I had her so much. But she grew up to be a nice young lady. But Lauren was special. She was special because she was my first grandchild. Zoe was born second. Zoe was born in 1990 at St. Joseph. And when I went to see Trezzy, I just knew she was going to have a boy, but she had Zoe. And Eric named her Zoe, and he told me that I don't care whether you like the name or not, this is what her name is going to be. So you don't have to have any input. And I guess because I tried to name Lauren, but I didn't get it. But he told me then that I wasn't going to have a say about what Zoe was named. But Zoe was named, and then Zoe grew up. She didn't used to like to go with me too much because she always wanted to be with her mom. But then when she got a little older and she saw what was going on, she always wanted to go. And when they would be bored on Saturdays, they would call me up and say, "Grandma, we don't have nothing to do. Can you come and get us?" And we would go to the mall, get something to eat, just go roaming around or do something. But I tried to do something with them on the weekends also. Brittany was born in March. And her mom was in the hospital having a hard time with Brittany when Brittany was born. But when Brittany was born, they lived in Rockville, so I didn't see her quite as much as I saw Lauren and Zoe. But I would go get Brittany and we would go away, and every summer I would take the girls away for a vacation. Lauren, Zoe, and Brittany.
If you had a message you would like to leave with your granddaughters, what would you like to tell them to keep in mind?
I would like them to grow up to be, which they have grown up to be, quite decent young ladies. They're respectful. They're mindful of people. They love their families. They love their parents. They love people. And I'm glad that they grew up to be who they are. I like them to remember that, to always treat people like you would like people to treat you. And always remember the way that I treated you is the way you should treat your children when they grow up.
Obviously, you remember Avery being born.
Avery was our first granddaughter. And she's our heart. We just spoiled her. We babysat with Avery for the first year of her life. We would babysit one week and Trezzy would babysit the other week. So Avery did not go to a daycare or anywhere until she was a year old. We would go down Lawrence and we spent the weekend, the whole week. And then Trezzy would spend the next week. But we watched Avery, and Avery is such a smart little girl now. And even though Pop is gone, when she comes up here, she looks up and she goes to his room and take his money and she say, "This is Pop's." And every time I talk to her, once in a while, she'll say, "I want to talk to Pop." So she remembers him.
What message would you like to tell Avery about what you have learned about people?
I learned to take people at face value. Listen to them, learn them, and be mindful of who you're talking to. Everybody is not going to treat you like you would like to be treated. And you have to treat people like you want them to treat you. Even though people don't seem to always give you respect, you listen to them and you just keep your thoughts to yourself. You don't always show how you feel about a person because your feelings might be wrong. But just don't look at a person and judge a person. And remember that the person you think is so smart, if you sit down and think about it, they're no smarter than you. If you think about people you know that you put on a pedestal, they know less than you know if you really think about it and you really get to talk to them and know them. And you would say, well, I thought they were and they're no more than you are. Nobody is any better than you are. They might know something that you don't know, but you know something that they don't know.
What were the best decisions you've made in your life?
The first best decision I made was to be mindful of who I was when I was growing up. I didn't have a lot of goals, but I did have a goal that I wanted to finish school. College wasn't in my rim of thinking because my mom had no money and I knew we weren't going to college. But I wanted to always get a job and have a job and always be able to take care of myself. Never depend on anyone to take care of me. And I'm also thankful and blessed that God gave me the insight to do the things that I did and to live my life the way that I lived it. Because I didn't realize when I was younger that things that happened to me, I thought that they just happened. But in the meantime, when I got older, I realized that God was leading me the way that I went. If it wasn't for Him leading and guiding me, we wouldn't be in this house today. Because I told God, I said, if you want us to move, then you will make a way for us to move, and you will show me that if my house sells within a certain length of time, then I can move. If it doesn't, I'm content where I was. But God has blessed me. He has taken care of me. He has led me in the way that He wanted me to go. And no, I'm not the best woman, but I do think about people's feelings. I do care about people, and I'm trying to help everyone I can along the way.
What are you the most proud of in your life?
I'm most proud of my children. I'm most proud of the way they live their life. The fathers that they are, I think they are both excellent fathers to their children. I could not have asked for any better fathers for them children. And I think they're good husbands to their wives. I don't know what goes on in their household. I don't care what goes on in their household. But evidently, they're decent men because they're still with their wives and they don't fight. That's the main thing. They don't fight. And I am most thankful for the way my children came up in their lives.
I have to say, I think you've done a wonderful job with this interview. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I thank you for taking your time and doing this interview. I hope it turned out to be what we expected it to be. I thank you for your patience. I thank you for having enough interest in me to do this interview.
Ms. Ireland, from the day we met, you and your family have always welcomed me and made me feel like part of the family.
You always have been part of the family. You've always been Eric's best friend, and he talks about you all the time.
You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.